Good evening, everyone. This is On Sound City Council. It is September 14th, 2020. It's approximately 7 p.m. This is our first meeting we have had in about 3 weeks. First of all, the public attendance at City Council meetings continues to be restricted at this time. Council meetings can be reviewed live on Rogers Cable TV, or viewed, not reviewed, or the Rogers TV website, and viewed or reviewed the next day on the city's YouTube channel. Individuals who wish to ask a question during a public question period may email the city clerk at bbloomfield@onsound.ca by 9 a.m. after tonight, I think, but noon right now, the day of the meeting. The next thing I want to do to start off this meeting is we know there is a Truth and Reconciliation report done for Canada, and a lot of municipalities and a lot of governments started to do a land acknowledgement. And we discussed it at the time, and maybe it was me that kind of decided, but I wanted it to be meaningful, not by rote, that we'd start every meeting that it would mean nothing. And tonight, I think, is one of those nights that I think you see why in a few minutes, that it's really important that we do it. And I want it to be meaningful. That's why I'm doing it tonight. So with that, we, a council, acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe peoples, whose traditional territories we gather and whose ancestors signed treaties 82, 45 and a half, and 72 with our ancestors. We recognize also the Great Lakes Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect of the land, on the land, and live in peace and friendship with all of its diverse people. So we're declaring the meeting open. I'm going to report we at Council had a closed session that started at 6 p.m. During the closed session, Council reviewed minutes from the closed session meeting of Council held on August 24th. Council also discussed one matter regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, regarding a matter which Council may hold a closed meeting under another Act, another Act 239 sub 2 sub G, being sections 35 sub 4 and sub B of the Police Services Act respecting neighborhood safety concerns, and Council identified the location of the hotspot. With that, I'm down to number 4, so I'm seeking additional business. Staff, is there any additional business?
Mr. Mayor, there's no additional business this evening.
Thank you. Councillors? None? I'll have 2 items myself. Keep you here until 10 o'clock. Kidding. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I did declare on this item in the closed session, and now I'd like to declare a non-disqualifying interest in the agenda item 12B, titled Neighborhood Safety, in accordance with Part 1 of the Code of Conduct, Avoidance of Conflicts of Interest. The reason is my wife and I own property in the vicinity but do not presently reside there.
Thank you. Marion, you've got the report. Number 6A is minutes of the closed session of the regular council meeting held on August 24th, 2020.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merton, that the minutes of the closed session of the regular council meeting held on August 24, 2020, as printed, be adopted.
Great, thank you. All in favor? And that has carried. Next set of minutes.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merton, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on August 24, 2020, as printed, be adopted.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. One more set.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merton, that the minutes of the special council meeting held on September 2nd, 2020, as printed, be adopted.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Now we're down to number 7 on the agenda, which is motion to move council into committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merton, that City Council now move into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Councillor Kepke. So we are now in Committee of the Whole. We're starting off with a public meeting at number 8. First of all, I wish to declare the public meeting open. This is a statutory public meeting pursuant to Section 12 of the Development Charges Act, which mandates such a meeting prior to Council's passage of a development charges bylaw. The purpose of the meeting is to give the public an opportunity to ask questions, provide comments, and make representations on the proposed development charges bylaw.
Through you, Your Worship, notice of this public meeting was posted on the city's website and published in the Sun-Times on August 21st. The background study was available on the city's website on October 16th, 2019, and the proposed draft bylaw was made available on the city's website on September 1st, 2020. The notice of this public meeting required individuals wishing to speak at the meeting to contact the clerk by the end of the day on the Friday prior to the meeting. One person requested to attend the meeting, and they are located just outside the council chambers. No written comments were provided respecting this meeting. Any personal information collected at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Development Charges Act. The information collected will be used to update the development charge bylaw and will form part of the public record. Questions about this collection should be addressed to myself, the city clerk.
Great, thank you. Presentation will be by the Director of Corporate Services. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to make sure my clicker here works, and it does. And I'm going to be running it here at the same time. So if you're like me, you're surprised to hear that it has been almost a year since we approved the background study that was completed by Hempson Consulting, and that our bylaw has been passed and enacted since November of last year. So why are we coming back to it? With any bylaw or any new bylaw specifically, I think it's fairly common that once we start using the bylaw, we often identify areas where there are open to interpretation or just language for clarification. In most cases, we would be able to make those minor language changes without coming back to council. However, there's a few items anticipated in tonight's recommendation in the staff report that require us to complete the changes within the 1 year of the background study to avoid having to undertake the exercise of doing a new background study. So we are sort of aiming to make those changes before October 16th of this year. Also, there have been some changes to Bill 108 since the background study and the previous bylaw was, or the enact bylaw was approved, and some of the anticipated changes were removed. Specifically, the ability to include soft services, studies and plans, and the removal of the 10% reduction of costs within the total development charge calculation. So council will recall, and we'll talk about this in a bit as well, that soft services such as outdoor recreation, police, fire, transit, waste collection, and studies and plans were to be removed from development charges in 2021 and ultimately levied in a new vehicle referred to as the Community Benefits Charge, or CBC. Since then, the province has let us know that, in fact, for municipality and the types of developments that we have here, that CBC levy no longer applies, and we are entitled to keep those soft services within the development charges bylaw. That being said, we chose not to include them at the time that we did our development charges calculation, so there will be an opportunity if council wants to bring those charges back in and collect for them, we can do that now. Also, in July 2020, the province made changes to the Development Charges Act as part of Bill 197. Some of the sections of the DC Act have not been proclaimed to date, but based on the recent changes made, staff believe that we have enough information in order to align our proposed changes to DC bylaws with some of the changes made under the DC Act, specifically the deferral of development charge payments required for rental, residential, institutional, and not-for-profit developments. That should be a second or a third bullet point, but to confirm council's intent to exempt purpose-built rental and the financial implications. So just to review some of those discretionary exemptions with you and review the financial implications as such and ensure that council is still committed to exempting purpose-built rental in the updated bylaw. To correct a small error in the non-residential DC as it applied on a per meter basis. So stormwater, the charge for stormwater was omitted, 23 cents. And to correct that 23 cents back in, we do need to adjust it within the study period. And then finally, the County of Grey is undertaking an update to their bylaw, which will be completed by November of 2020. And certainly the mayor and deputy mayor will be aware that at the most recent meeting of county council that update was presented and it is moving forward. So that update should be complete by November 2020. And then they are planning to do a full study in 2021 with an expected new charge in effect for 2022. And it is certainly our goal, since we administer this county's development charge bylaw on their behalf when those charges are imposed on developers, to make sure that our bylaw closely mirrors theirs, is it just makes it more simple when they're doing those total calculations and explaining what charges apply when there's both the municipal and the county charge that are relevant. So the amended bylaw that is presented from staff does not include a change to the total residential charge imposed. And you'll recall that council directed a cap of $8,000 to be put on the residential development charge. There is a correction, as I mentioned, to the non-residential charge, as the 23 cents for stormwater was omitted in error in the previous bylaw. With that being said, Bill 108 no longer requires that soft services be removed from the DC upon transition to a community benefits charge. As such, council has the opportunity tonight to add back the amounts for services including outdoor recreation, studies and plans, libraries, police, transit, and waste management, or any combination of these. Adding all these services back to the bylaw will bring the residential charge to $9,670. And I just want to reiterate that if they are not added to the DC charge, there will no longer be a future opportunity to collect for these services through the CBC. As I said before, we have not currently adjusted the total charge, as our understanding was that $8,000 remains the upper limit that council is willing to charge on a single and semi-detached unit. So I'm just going to walk quickly through some of the proposed changes. Oh, pardon me. Walk quickly through some of the proposed changes in the amended bylaw. The first is a change in the definition for not-profit to be consistent with the County of Grey. The new definition broadens the scope of not-for-profit developments to include any corporation without share capital whose primary objective is to provide housing. And this also is in line with the Ontario regulation. We're also recommending a minor change to the rental housing development definition to clarify that in order to be exempt, the development must be creating at least 4 new units, and that it does not apply to condominiums, life leases, or freehold ownership. Previously, it could be interpreted that adding 2 units to bring the total units to 4 may be exempt, and this had implications to commercial conversions to residential. Staff felt that that was not council's intent, and we intended to update the language to reflect that. In the calculation of development charges, the previous bylaw had 3 fee schedules, one for hard services, soft services, and then the area-specific development charge. Now that we are no longer removing the soft services for indoor recreation from the bylaw in 2021, we've reduced the total number of schedules to 2. So there's one for the citywide development charge, and there is one for the area-specific. And this also just makes it simpler for staff to interpret when they're applying the bylaw and calculating the total fee. In the calculation of development charges for residential, we've eliminated a section 6.2, which is where development is proposed on a lot of record that has not been created by consent or plan of subdivision since the year 2000. The calculated development charge shall not include a charge for hard services. This was old language that had been inadvertently, I would say, carried forward into the last 2 bylaws, and the language it just no longer serves any purpose given our current development practices. And then we've added in 6.4.4, for greater certainty, any other residential class of building includes a building where residential uses predominate prior to redevelopment. This is in response to a situation where a mixed-use property existing a mixed-use existing property, that was mostly residential, as proven by CVA and gross floor area, was converting a small commercial section to residential. If the building was purely residential to begin with, a single unit addition would be exempt under the Act. However, for an existing commercial property, conversion to residential triggers a charge for the residential DC, less a credit at the non-residential rate. Adding this clarification that a predominantly residential mixed-use building will be treated as residential rather than non-residential, and a DC will not be imposed. Within the exemptions section, we've added language to ensure, language will be added, to ensure that discretionary exemptions, including the nonprofit and purpose-built rental, are only exempt from the citywide development charge, and that the area-specific development charge, if these developments are in the Sydenham Heights area, as outlined in Schedule D, will still apply. Updated to amend 8.1.2 to include pursuant to the Act, and this is just to clarify that buildings used for school purposes are exempt under the Act and not at the discretion of council. We amended 8.1.6, that not-for-profit exemption, to reflect the broader definition employed by the county and the Ontario regulation. And then we are not recommending any change in the definition of purpose-built rental exemption. I do want to highlight this, as you will recall that we have been discussing this in other areas. For one, the community improvement plan has contemplated adding a development charge rebate as opposed to including the exemption within the bylaw. There's pros and cons to both. Certainly from staff's point of view, the potential cost of this exemption has been a red flag. I think in the report it highlights a 240 unit rental development would have total City of Owen Sound municipal or development charges waived of almost $1.2 million. Considering that must now be deferred over 6 payments, sort of eases that burden a little bit. However, that is still revenue given up. Ultimately, staff is recommending that we do leave that exemption in the bylaw to be consistent with the county, and noting that the county will continue to monitor vacancy rates. So if we get to a point where we do achieve a certain vacancy rate, we have the ability to come back and look at this. I'll also add the caveat that as we move through the community improvement plan, there may also be an opportunity for council to make that change at that time. It would mean that we have to come back and amend our bylaw, development charges bylaw again. But one of the things that the staff report will be looking for from council tonight is just to reconfirm that that exemption is still within your intent, and leave it as such. Another change is related to the payment of development charges, to add language around required deferral of development charges pursuant to section 26.1 within the Act, and this is updated in July of 2020. Section comes from Bill 197 and will ultimately require the deferral of DCs over 5 years for purpose-built rental and institutional developments as per the OREG definition, and 20 years for nonprofit. As the current bylaw exempts not-for-profit and purpose-built rental, this really only applies to institutional developments as defined by the Act. Broadly, this includes long-term care homes as defined by the Long-Term Care Homes Act, retirement homes as per the Retirement Homes Act, post-secondary institutions, including universities and Indigenous institutions, and properties of the Royal Canadian Legion and hospices. Also, there's a proposal to add language around the development fee in effect when the timing between the date certain planning applications are made and when approval is granted would result in a change in the total applicable development charges pursuant with section 26.2, and that is just catching up with language in the Development Charges Act as well. Next, to add language requiring deferral agreements in accordance with 26.1. Even with a legislated deferral requirement, an agreement will protect the city in the event of default and clarify who is responsible to make the payments should the property change hands in the deferral term. And then for the purpose-built rental exemption, to add language requiring an agreement to demonstrate intent to remain a rental development for a period stipulated in the agreement and registered on title. And this would come into force at a time when that property changed from being a rental development to some sort of freehold condominium life lease sort of situation, that DCs would become payable at that time. And finally, to add language, this is something we've gone back and forth on. When do we have to fund the reserve for DCs that are waived or exempted within the bylaw? After speaking to our consultant, just to cover our position on this, I'm proposing that we add language regarding the funding of the reserve in order to defer the obligation for the tax base to fund development for fees waived to the time that the capital investment is undertaken. So our development charges are calculated based on an estimated future capital plan. Ultimately, when we undertake those capital projects, we're able to draw from the DC reserve. I'd like to add language to the bylaw that just says that if the funds are not in the reserve, we cannot put the reserve into a deficit position, and it is at that time that the taxpayer will fund the growth rather than having to fund the reserve immediately upon waiving those fees. And in speaking with our consultant, he felt that that could be appropriate. So in conclusion, this is the summary of changes to the development charges bylaw. There is a staff report brought forward tonight, and that will have 3 goals really: to update the changes as described, to confirm the total residential fee to remain capped at $8,000, and to review the discretionary exemptions and ensure that there's still the intent of council to waive those types of developments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So a motion would basically do those 3 things that you just covered last. Good. I'm reading the report. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So next we'd be looking for comments from the public. Sorry about that, Kate. There, I'll get you to maybe tip the microphone up towards you a little bit more. There we go. State your name and where you live. What municipality, I guess.
Ted Stewart from Owen Sound. Hello, Mayor.
Welcome.
Council. I wanted to speak tonight about the matter we just heard. I am in favor of keeping the bylaw such that purpose-built rental housing is exempt from the development charges, as we need more purpose-built rental that stays rental and not goes to condominium. I believe that the development charges are necessary so that the people who live in Owen Sound and the people who are coming to Owen Sound receive the services that they expect and want to have. This is an attractive city, and to keep it attractive, we need the development charges to fund the things that keep it attractive. The charges that we are considering to include back into the development charges, I think are necessary to include back in. We know that fire and police charges are very expensive, and the city needs that revenue so that the burden is shared between the people who are living here and the people who will be coming to the city of Owen Sound. There's another matter that was alluded to, but will be discussed later, I understand, and that will be deferral of development charges by companies that will be coming and building in Owen Sound, or they'll be looking to have a building permit issued. And I believe that the deferral is not necessary, or for the fact that large companies coming to Owen Sound.
Ted, I'm just going to cut you off there
Yes.
because now you're into a different report. We're
Yes, I
talking
am.
about this development charges. Good.
Okay, well, I'll just say I don't.
You made your point, but
Thank you.
just refocus. Thanks.
Well, that's the focus. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Now, was there anyone else indicating no? So we've heard from the clerk, we've heard from the Director of Corporate Services, we've now heard one public comment. So with that, I will declare the public meeting closed. And we will move on with number 9 on the agenda, and that's deputations. And tonight we have Susan Staves here with regard to the 10th Street Bridge dedication. Welcome, Susan. I'll get you to push the little kind of purpley button there. There we go. Now it's
How's
on.
that?
Might want to pull it down just a little bit so it's kind of aiming. There you go.
There.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Body and Council. My name is Nani Mckay, better known as Susan Staves Shank, a member of the Chippewas of Nawash of the Saugeen Ojibwe Traditional Territory that is part of the Three Fires Confederacy. I'm here to talk about the significance of dedicating the new bridge on 10th Street as Gitche-Neme-Wikwidon, which means Great Sturgeon Bay, the name of Owen Sound before contact. The word reconciliation means to renew or restore a friendship. The past cannot be changed. We may not feel responsible for it, but we have a responsibility for the present, and with knowledge, we can bring about changes for the future together. I want to read a quote from Chief Greg Nadjuan of Neoshiniming. He says that it's so important to acknowledge San territory with its original place names, and by doing so, strengthens our friendship with the city. I look forward to the dedication. So also I want to read a story by Elder Paul Nadjuan from Neoshiniming. Can I take this mask off? Okay, thank you. So it's the story is about the significance of the sturgeon, Neme. It has been reported that the largest sturgeons caught on Lake Huron was about 300 pounds and exceeded 8 feet in length. It's possible that a larger example may have existed in the depths of Great Lakes when the elders from Neoshiniming referred to Georgian Bay as Gitche-Neme-Wikwidon. This term has been used for generations when using the Anishinaabe-Moan language. Excuse me. It means Great Sturgeon Bay. This term ties back to the creation stories, and it has been said that Nokomis, Gitche-Neme-Kwe, which means great grandmother sturgeon, with her longevity, wisdom of knowledge, the entirety of the lakes and all the havens where fish feed and gives birth to their young, as well as the whereabouts of medicines, and she gave birth to the clans. Most Anishinaabe have a clan spirit as a family protector or dotem. The elders used to say, Gitche-Neme-Kwe remains a true guardian of the lakes, of all the fish, the waters, currents, and all things related to these waters. So in memory of the elders who retain their traditional knowledge and place names, we would like to dedicate Gitche-Neme-Wikwidon as our iconic leader of the Reconciliation Garden here at Castle Beach. After hearing the oral traditions of the area, the committee agreed to commemorate this creation story from the elders and dedicated the sturgeon to serve as a physical, spiritual, and cultural link to the land base where many Anishinaabe have resided. In its location, Grandmother Sturgeon will see the Potawatomi River, the Owen Sound waterfront, and the larger part of the lake which connects the area waters known as Georgian Bay. So the people of Owen Sound and the Indigenous people of the area support the name dedication of Gitchiname Wikwidon. So thank you. That's my report.
That's great. Thank you, Susan. Does anyone have any questions? Comments? I've known Susan for a few years, and some of you won't know her, but it was either 2007 when we were involved in homecoming or 2008 when I went onto operations. But I think it was 2007 that Susan came with this plan to do the garden, which is being placed at the south end of the council property right now. It was long before we ever got to the word reconciliation, and they had this this dream and this plan of putting this garden there in this little parkette that will bring us all together and celebrate the history of the Anishinaabe people, which is that's their village right there, the old Brook property. And Susan and her committee have worked so hard to get it almost done and moved it along. And really, as a city, we haven't had to do much except get out of the way. Though you will remember by last budget, we did pass that we were going to purchase or pay for the sturgeon that will go into part of it. So Susan's been a big leader in this community on what now is reconciliation, but wasn't at the start, and has really done a lot for us. Susan, can I put you on the spot and ask you about your ancestry?
I guess so. Yes, I have the name of my ancestor, which means upright woman. She lived where Cobble Beach is right now. She fought for land rights. She was one of the first land advocates in Canada. She went to see Queen Victoria in 1860 to ask for recognition for them to hold right to property. And before that happened, though, she did see Queen Victoria, but before it could happen, she died on the property. And yeah, so that's mainly what she did. But yeah, she's my third great-grandmother.
And also known as?
Nani Mckay.
And?
Upright woman. And Catherine Sutton.
Catherine Sutton is what some of us may know.
Yeah.
Amazing family connection. Carol, you had your hand up. Sorry.
Through your worship. So you are here today to present the concept of naming the bridge.
Yeah.
So is it appropriate at this point in time, I'm a newbie, I'm still learning, to make a motion to move that forward, or is it, how do we move this forward?
Probably what we would do is either ask for a report to come back or ask for it to go to a committee, but I think probably ask for a report to come back to council is what Mr. Simmons is nodding his head.
So I would be pleased to make that report, that request for a report to come back.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Susan, thanks for coming here. You mentioned the name with your mask on. Can you just repeat the name?
Do you want me to take it off?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. The name of the dedication?
Yeah.
It would be Gitchiname Wikwidon, which means Great Sturgeon Bay.
And do you anticipate the lettering to be consistent with your the Aboriginal lettering?
Yes.
Or,
yes.
And you envision big signage, I take it then, or modest signage?
I really don't know. Whatever I just would like the bridge to be known as that name, and a plaque of some sort would be lovely. Just because that is the name of the place before contacts.
I think it's a fascinating idea, and I suspect you get a lot of support on council. So yeah, I support that. I happen to live at Cobble, and I did a small history on Was your great-great-grandmother?
Yes, their great-grandmother.
It's a heck of a family story. So I was sharing that with Caldwell residents. So
Oh, great.
I think she would have golfed. So, yeah.
She might have, I don't know.
But it's great seeing you.
Oh, thank you.
Again, thank you very much for
Okay.
coming in and doing that
Thank you all.
presentation and putting it onto our plate. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
Good evening.
going to go now to Carol. If she wants to make that motion right now, let's,
Through your worship, then I would like to, the motion is to move the report forward to, or the recommendation. I would be happy to make that request for that report to come back to council. Thank you.
Mr. Simmons, do you want to add to that? Was that clear?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Martin. Yeah, we're clear. And our Director of Public Works, who has been working on the 10th Street Bridge, will bring that report back to council in the near term.
Thank you.
So I will call the question on that in favor to get that report back. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Carol. So we're down to number 10, which is a public question period. Ms. Bloomfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did receive one question, and it was from Kelda Mickelson, and it reads as follows. I'm a frontline healthcare worker who has been working in a mask for full shifts since March and through the hot months of summer to protect my coworkers and vulnerable residents. The medical officer of health has mandated mask use in indoor spaces. It was painful to watch council and see that both staff and councillors had such a variety of practices, no masks, removing masks, etc. Deputy Mayor O'Leary and Mayor Boddy were clearly not 2 meters from each other or from the deputy clerk who wore his mask throughout the meeting. Yet Mr. O'Leary had his mask off and on all meeting with no relation to his speaking. Mr. Boddy had his nose exposed often. Miss Allen had her mask on at all times, even when she gave a report, which was very easy to hear. What is your masking protocol, and why are you not setting a better example for the citizens of Owen Sound?
I think it's probably best if we ask our city manager, Mr. Simmons, to reply to that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to address that question. So I think I'd want to start by just saying I want to state that the health and safety of our employees and the public is always council and our staff's top priority. Before returning to in-person council meetings, a full risk assessment was conducted with our facilities team and our safety team here at the city, and with input from Grey Bruce Health Unit. Several control measures have been implemented, and I know that those watching on Rogers or listening may not have seen that background work that was done prior to us coming back together. But again, how the camera angles look, I can't tell, but just to assure people watching tonight and those listening, from a social distancing perspective, staff have measured all of the space between each member of council here in the council chamber, and also between staff persons and presenters. In fact, what you can see is that on the council members' tables, there are small green dots placed. So that measurement, actually, they can see right in front of them every time they sit down for any meeting held here. Cleaning, disinfecting wipes are available throughout the council chamber. Also, disinfecting lotion is available for each person's use. For hand sanitizer throughout the council chamber. Screening, all councillors, staff, and visitors are required to self-screen prior to entering City Hall. Generally, we always follow guidelines from Public Health Ontario, the Grey Bruce Health Unit, and other authorities, and we strongly encourage all citizens to also do so. Our council meetings are currently only open for councillors, essential staff, and public participants. Limited numbers of media are welcomed. They're put into a separate boardroom where they can view the council meeting going on, and as an added precaution, disposable masks are available here at the council door. Today, we reached out to Dr. Ian Era just to confirm our interpretation of the wearing of face covering and masks, and Dr. Era provided us with this statement. In my capacity as the Medical Council of Health for the Grey Bruce Health Unit, I was consulted by the City of Owen Sound on the city's reopening plans of its buildings. My recommendations have been to only mandate mask use and face coverings in areas of the building where public has uncontrolled access. Council chamber was excluded from this mandate. Nevertheless, the city officials decided to use masks in the council chamber to encourage the public to use masks. I commend them on this. So we've been following Dr. Ian Era's guidelines. The staff, I can assure all those watching and the citizens watching that council members here in this controlled environment have been following social distancing and mask wearing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next,
Thanks, Mayor Body. If I could just add to that, I'd like to, just make it known how thankful I think all of council is and are at the work that staff put into ensuring that council was able to come back to the chambers to meet at the start of July. I think we were one of the earliest municipalities, not just in this area, but perhaps in Southern Ontario, to be able to come together. And that's a reflection of how hard staff worked to ensure that it's safe for us to be in here. And I do hear from residents at various times about the audio and the capabilities. We got moments where we're going to take a drink, or we want to be heard by our partners on council, and we want to be heard clearly by those at home. So at times it is quite important to ensure that we're speaking up, but I know I feel quite safe in here, and it's great that we do take these precautions as well. So thanks to staff for your work in ensuring that we've been able to get in here.
great, thanks, Councillor Gregg, for thanking staff and doing that for us. At number 11, we have no correspondence for which the consideration direction is necessary. We're down to number 12A, reports from city staff, starting with Ms. Allen again with regard to the development charge amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't review the whole report as it basically outlines every bullet point that was provided in the presentation for the public meeting. I will point out that the recommendation is to direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to amend the development charges as outlined in the report. So our draft bylaw includes every one of those points brought up. And I would just reiterate as well that with regards to the total charge, the draft bylaw includes that $8,000 limit. Within the analysis section of this report, it touches on what the impact would be if you were to bring back in those soft services, which would bring that $8,000 charge up to $9,670. And it also details out what the charge per each envelope would be if you wanted to consider even bits and pieces. I will also point out in the purpose-built rental section, we did consider sort of a theoretical development of 240 rental units, and it just shows the calculation of what that total fee waive would be. In this case, 240 units would be almost $1.2 million, which represents a 4% levy increase. And then finally, just to have council confirm the profit purpose-built rental, as well as the other ones that have carried forward.
Great, thank you. I think Councillor Thomas had his hand up there first.
Thanks, Your Worship. So the recommendation as it stands, we'll keep the cap at $8,000. I'd move the recommendation then, Your Worship, as is.
Okay, discussion. Councillor Koepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the director. On the discretionary exemptions, can you explain to me how you calculate the amount, such as $276 to libraries, but yet only $52 to waste collection?
That would have been based on the capital plan that was presented as part of our background study. So as part of that process, staff identified certain projects required to facilitate or service anticipated growth. And based on those capital projects divided over the total number of anticipated development units, came up with those charges.
And there already are accounts under development charges, such as library has a significant amount of money in it that we're not anticipating using right now, but yet
there's currently approximately $40,000 in the library's development charge reserve. Those funds could be used, and it is allocated to future collections that would be required as a result of growth in the community.
And when will we next be reviewing the development charges bylaw again?
Our current bylaw will stand for 4 years from 20 2000 or 1999, but we really can update it at any point if we determine that it needs to change.
Thank you.
That'd be 2019 or 1999?
It would be 2019.
Yeah, perfect, thanks.
Had a 9 in it.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I asked this question at the county, and it was Randy Scherzer that answered it, so I'm not sure if I'm asking you, Kate, or Pam. Just using the Strathcona development as an example, the development charges are waived or deferred, and we enter in an agreement with the contractor, and that goes on title, correct?
I'll let Pam speak to that development specifically, but those would have been waived under the previous bylaw.
Okay, so they're just waived, period. So my question is, in 10 years' time, if the contractor sells that and the new owner decides to make it a condo or sells each unit into condos, those development charges that were deferred or waived will now be applicable. And at the county, those development charges would go all the way back to 2020, whatever those were. Are we doing the same in our municipality?
Because of how that specific project was treated, there will not be that agreement, or there currently isn't that agreement. But the current update to the bylaw for future purpose-built rental developments will be that there is an agreement that is registered on title that will define a period of time in which, if it were to convert to any other type of ownership, development charges in their full amount will become payable at that point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Worship. I wanted to go back and just have that, we talked about this a year ago, and I just wanted to highlight the reasons why council at that time had made that decision of saying $8,000 and excluding the soft services. When we had that debate last year, we had that discussion of what we thought was going to be an appropriate amount to charge a developer to develop in our city. We had that idea about what we were going to do for rentals, and why we were going to give them a break on their development charges because we have a housing shortage. When we started talking about the actual soft services, we had that discussion about police, fire, library, indoor recreation. And at that time, council had that open discussion of saying, why are we taxing a developer for funds that will sit in a reserve? And just moments ago, Kate Allen had provided me that budget tally sheet. And what we're looking at is we do have $1.5 million still sitting in a DC reserve. 500 of that from our meeting at last year, 500,000 of that was allocated to the 10th Street Bridge because of we knew that was a growth-oriented aspect. We kept indoor rec in because we wanted to have that new subsidy to help off pay the rec center. But when we talk about the discussions of why aren't we including police and fire, I'm looking at a spreadsheet right now that shows me 6 years of DC charges that were collected. And on police alone, we have $30,000 and have never had an expense. And I don't know how many other people enjoy watching our budget meetings. We've sat through a number of them. And every single time we go through our budget, we always ask that general question, when can DCs be applied? And most people, and my family and myself included, prior to coming to council, you would say, at budget, we should be able to apply as much as we can. But we can't. So that's where we're saying, yes, we're saying we're not going to take that soft service, but it doesn't mean that we're just automatically going to charge it back. Well, we're not actually spending it in the first place. We have here in police, we have 6 years that we've collected to sit in a reserve that we won't use for a long period of time. Library, $40,000. Councillor Thomas has made comments several times, unless we're talking about opening up a satellite office someplace or doing a larger collection, which would result in a larger building, we're not really getting use of those funds. So why do we collect them from anyone? I think that's an overcharge of what we're charging these developers. So in my perspective alone, I'm just saying the reasons why some of those soft services weren't included, and the reason why we still wouldn't expect those soft services to be included, are because we're not actually using the money. And if we do take that money, it sits there. So I don't think that's reasonable or responsible for our developers in the community. And I also do want to recommend or send my my applause, I guess, to that discussion about residential realty. Going forward, if you have a rental, and we do see this, we do know that there's more development coming, more rental development coming. The 9th Avenue, we're hearing all these new developments coming that are going to provide housing for our housing shortage. But if that does change, and we have that 20-year buyback period for new development, so that way if that does change, no one's pulling the wool over council's eyes or the city's eyes. That will be funds that will still come back to this community and help with future growth. But I did want to point that out because this council has identified last year when we have passed this original agreement to really focus in on our hard services. Transportation, indoor rec are those long-term capital projects that if we didn't collect for them, then we were going to be paying those out of the annual tax base. So to hear that we're putting $500,000 of that 1.5 to use is a congratulations, a pat on the back. And going forward, we'll continue to always get that. But the soft services, I will reiterate, it's not like we're just not taking the money and now we're charging it to taxpayers. We just, most times, don't have the ability to actually spend the money because it doesn't qualify.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? I'm just going to follow up with a question, Kate, from what Travis has just said. And Mr. Stewart that was in earlier kind of asked a question about we need to, I don't want to misphrase it, but along the lines of being able to spend the money to make the city beautiful. And just to be clear, when we collect development charges, they're not spent on this year's operations like a tax. They're not spent on repairing or replacing a road that's already there, that's already servicing a neighborhood. These specifically have to be used for something new, future growth related. So in addition to the library or something like that. And that's the point that, that Travis, I think, has made, that it has to be used for a specific thing that we don't always have that growth to spend it on. So we're holding money for no reason. Is that kind of fair?
Yeah, so as we went through those capital plans, we really looked at the projects and the area-specific development charge, but even the growth that's anticipated with the east side is a great example. So the waste management fee would have anticipated potentially adding another waste management vehicle. Increasing the transit fee would possibly include increasing the number of bus stops and potentially adding another route to the transit route. Because that would be to facilitate an area that currently has no population, but is planned to have new population. That is something that would qualify to have a development charge applied.
Great, thank you. Great example. Okay, anyone else? If not, we'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. Mr. Simmons, City Manager, Mr. Simmons, with regard to 12B, the enhanced neighborhood safety.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Report before you this evening, enhanced neighborhood safety is a direct result of the meeting that this council called last week, a special council meeting, seeking staff to come back with a report identifying opportunities for enhancing safety options and costing in a specific neighborhood. The specific neighborhood in question has been experiencing an unprecedented issue with various bylaw and policing issues. And that can be summed up in today's policing standards and across norms across North America as a hotspot. Currently, our bylaw officers operate in a compliance mode rather than an enforcement mode. And that in itself is somewhat unique to Owen Sound. A lot of bylaw officers across Ontario operate both in compliance and enforcement. So we would be looking in our options being presented to council tonight, moving to at least in a pilot program to moving bylaw into an enforcement mode. We understand that also enforcement is not the single solution to this issue. We have myself and the Chief of Police, and I'd like to thank Chief Ambrose and Owen Sound Police Services for participating in this report and providing a lot of research and information into it. In our conversations with United Way, Safe and Sound, mental health providers here within the city, Grey County Housing, They too agree that enforcement is not the single issue. But again, what we wanted to present to council tonight is an opportunity to pilot a hotspot program that we would look at over the next 6 to 7 weeks, report back to council on November 2nd with how this moves forward, seeing what successes we hope might come out of this. And before you are those options, all with costs associated. We have tried to be mindful of the budget that council has approved this year. These items, I would make note, are not budgeted right now. We would, through the budget cycle at the end of the year, identify costs associated with this initiative, this pilot, under bylaw, and then deal with how we deal with those costs at the end of the year through the budget cycle. With that, I'm open for any questions.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be happy to move the recommendation. That includes numbers 1, 2, and in number 3, direct staff to implement option B as outlined in the report, including bringing forward bylaws to A and B. Thanks.
Discussion, questions? Councillor Merton, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to begin by speaking directly to the neighborhood and the community residents who have expressed their concern about this matter over recent weeks. Please understand that I have walked in your shoes and had similar experiences in this city and other communities. A stone's throw from where I have lived in Owen Sound was a house being used for similar activity, steps from a crosswalk, and near 2 local schools. I get it. I've been there. I've lived in neighborhoods that you are living in as well. However, as I read the report before us today, I began to feel as if I was seeing an ill-fitting bandage that partially covers the issue, but as our city manager has mentioned, does not address it in a comprehensive way. It does not address the issues, concerns, and rights of all the people in the community. We are presented with a multiple choice A, B, and C option. In many multiple choices, there's also a D which says none of the above. I would appreciate the opportunity to have a broader strategy, a more comprehensive plan that incorporates all aspects, including enforcement and bylaw policy changes, if that is how we need to proceed. Right now, presented before us is a solely human resource approach, using law enforcement and municipal bylaw enforcement as our tools. I have to ask, this has gone on for a while. What will change in 6 weeks that has not changed since June? Will we have another request to extend, or will this be the go-to solution for any reoccurrence? Or as this report reminds us, this has been a historic pattern. When a hot spot disappears in one part of the community, it could pop up in another and does. If we continue to do the same thing, we will get the same results with added costs to all of us as taxpayers. I believe we need and deserve more. Not necessarily more police cars sitting in front of homes, and not necessarily more municipal bylaw officers checking out properties alone. All the residents of this city deserve a comprehensive, inclusive solution prepared and provided to us by our partners. At this point in time, since option D, none of the above, is presented to us, I am not supporting this recommendation because I wish to have a more comprehensive plan that might include these recommendations of the others presented. However, I will not request an amendment of the motion at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak to it? Seeing none. Oh, Scott, go ahead. Councillor Craig.
Thanks, everybody. I just, in relation to this particular location, some of us have heard repeatedly from neighbors over the summer. It's terrible what these neighbors have had to live through. Their enjoyment of their properties has been violated in a manner I wouldn't wish upon anyone. I can absolutely vouch for your comments, Councillor Merton, about it being close to home to you. I happened to be in your neighborhood recently, and I heard a situation which developed into a full police response and language that I would hope nobody should ever hear in their life. It's terrible to see those instances go on in our community. Unfortunately, there's a uniqueness about this property here that allows that type of scenario to go on and on. One thing that has been difficult this year has been action by the courts to respond in these instances. I had the great pleasure one evening of doing a ride along with the Owen Sound Police Services, and I could not tell you how often we were past that property and how much it takes away from their ability to police other parts of the city and to really get some inside information as to what's fueling this problem. One thing that it's been difficult to instill into this situation is a deterrent. Unfortunately, it seems to be lacking in so many places in today's society, and we all take advantage of speeding when or not signaling when there's no police officer around us. And unfortunately, this is on a whole new level of taking advantage of the situation. I'll gladly support the motion. It does come with added costs, but I think I'm quite keen on seeing what kind of a response that this new policy will get over 6 or 8 weeks. We just can't, we don't have the resources in bylaw to continue to lean on our existing resources to respond. We all hear of instances of garbage collecting in the city and various other bylaw infractions that we need to respond to equally. So this is a situation taking away from our ability to administer the whole corporation. So I'll support the recommendation as it is.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. And through you, just to follow up, a little bit disappointed in, I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Merton, but you had the opportunity to find out what we've done, where we've come from, just from the start of this to the end, and you didn't educate yourself on that. Like this, to say that we're adding a Band-Aid is the opposite of what we've done. We have come so far with this building, it's incredible. So I think you need more information, but that's just my opinion.
Just a clarification, I have been in communication on a regular basis with key players in City Hall and our support agencies. So I just want to make you aware that I have done my homework, but thank you. Thank you for that.
So you do understand where we started from and where we're at through the city manager
and I have had conversation, documentation from a variety, including the chief of police, from our support agencies and support services. But thank you for that.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed is 1, so that is carried. 12C, I think Ms. Bloomfield, you advising us procedural bylaw review. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through your worship, this report relates to the city's procedural bylaw and is being brought forward for council to consider housekeeping amendments and changes to the Municipal Act. Further suggested amendments relating to public participation may be forthcoming following the upgrades to the audiovisual capabilities of council chambers and the upgrades to the agenda meeting software. There are several recommendations in the report, and I'm going to highlight the ones that may be of interest to the public, but of course welcome any questions or comments that council may have. Throughout the pandemic, we've had deputations and presentations through electronic means. Staff recognize that this approach is a safe, efficient, and cost-effective means for public engagement and suggest that the option continue even when there is no longer a declared emergency. Conduct guidelines have also been added to ensure transparency with presenters. Staff are recommending that public question period be formalized to align with other sections of the procedural bylaw and include a registration process. A registration process provides staff with the opportunity to know how many individuals are expected to participate and allows council and staff to know what questions are coming forward. Should physical distancing requirements remain, it also allows the clerk to work with the individuals on the best way to ask the question. A transition period will be used to provide time to educate the public on the new process. The electronic meeting section of the bylaw has the most recommendations and includes permitting electronic participation for all open and closed meetings at the council, board, and committee level, increasing the maximum number of regular council meetings that a member may attend electronically from 2 to 5, and adding a maximum of 2 meetings for boards and committees. Should a member need to go over the maximum, they can seek approval from the mayor or chair. This report also recommends permitting unlimited electronic participation for all special or emergency meetings of council, boards, or committees. Bill 197 enables members to attend electronically and be counted towards quorum. While in-person attendance is encouraged, staff feel that the members attending electronically are able to participate in a fulsome way such that they should be counted toward quorum, and it also provides members with more flexibility to address issues such as illness, vacation, and family or business commitments. Staff recommends that the chair attend electronic meetings in person, that members be counted towards quorum when participating electronically, and that a reduced notice period be used. No changes are being suggested for the notices of motion section, but I will remind council that if motions are brought forward for items not listed on the agenda, a notice of motion is required unless a motion to waive this provision is approved by council or the board or committee. Although the Municipal Act now provides councils with the option of permitting proxy voting, adding the ability for members to participate electronically is staff's preferred method of an alternate means of participation. Proxy voting may pose accountability and transparency concerns, as discussions could take place at a meeting that the absent member will be unaware of when they provided their vote to the proxy. It may also be difficult for the public to understand the process and why a member voted a certain way. Should council be interested in pursuing this option, a motion requesting a staff report will be required. The recommendation in the report is to bring forward a bylaw to adopt an updated procedural bylaw as outlined in the report. Bring forward a bylaw to repeal the current procedural bylaw and provide notice of the procedural bylaw update as required by the notice bylaw.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Worship. Just a few comments. I'm willing to move the recommendation, but wanted to make my comments first. Particularly around recommendation number 12. I'm a retired individual whose commitment is to council and my committee meetings and a couple of volunteer organizations that I belong to. So the rest of that time that I'm not doing those things is my own time. And in the past, my husband and I have spent significant time in Florida, and in better times, maybe we would do that again. However, I don't feel that adding 5 calendar meetings a year in the recommendation that I can be absent should be taking place, because my commitment is to council. Committee meetings, you're only allowed to have 2 meetings to be away from and not attend electronically, and I think the same should apply for council. Number 14 allows the chair to permit a member to participate in certain circumstances with their discretion. So if I was hospitalized or ill and not able to attend, I'm sure the mayor would allow that discretion for me to attend electronically, give or take. However, I really don't think that we should be conveniently allowing members of council to be away or to attend electronically for 5 meetings, as I do simply feel that that is a convenience, and our commitment is to this council. And I really don't think that that one should be taking place. So I'm happy to move the recommendation, save and accept recommendation number 12.
So that would leave number 12 out as a separate motion.
As it stands now, Your Worship, because the maximum is 2, we would not need to do a further motion.
So
It would just keep it
require-
at 2.
It would just leave it, okay. So the change would be the motion, and otherwise it stays at 2. Okay, thank you. So further discussion, Councillor Thomas, I see your hand up next.
I guess I have a problem with recommendation number 7. I'm always very mindful of any move that might restrict the public's access to the council. And while I understand now during our pandemic proceedings that we do need to have the questions in advance, I really personally could not support this motion if we're going to require members of the public to pre-register their questions to this council. I think that anybody should be free to come to these meetings at any time they want and ask any question they want. And I freely admit that sometimes that's kind of uncomfortable and it's a little difficult to deal with. But I have seen many boards, including our local school board, pass regulations that have limited the public's access to them with disastrous consequences. So I'd like to see number 7 completely removed, to be totally honest.
Thank you. Others? Councillor, Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't really looking at number 7. I think now that you talked about it, I would almost think that for some people it would be they would enjoy the fact that they could put the question in ahead of time rather than come to the podium. There would be lots of people that don't want to come to the podium. Anyway, I wanted to echo Councillor Kepke's comments on 12 and 14. Totally agree. You know, we've got a pretty committed council right now, but if we did have someone on council that decided to go to Florida for 3 months and, you know, and just do council from Florida, we'd be in a tough spot. And like Councillor Kepke said, number 14 covers that. If we need more than 2, it's up to the discretion of the mayor, and I think we're fine with that.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, everybody. I've got a couple questions. One, I'd like to know more about cell phone use in our procedural bylaw. Could you perhaps expand on that? I think we're a little loose with what's permissible. Me personally, I've seen cell phones used in closed as well as open, and that I'm not comfortable with. I think if I could have a refresher on what is currently allowed. And go ahead.
Sure. Through your worship. Currently in our procedural bylaw, members and the public cannot use recording devices or electronic devices to record meetings or take photos. But besides that, they can technically use them, but they need to be on silent mode. This is for council members. It's under the conduct of council section in the procedural bylaw.
So would this, if I was to advocate for a change to that, which I don't think we need to be using cell phones in either of those settings, would that be code of conduct or can it be included in the procedural bylaw?
Through your worship, it could be included in the procedural bylaw. I would just recommend that a follow-up motion be presented this evening if you wish, or it could be looked at in a future report.
Okay, thanks. And secondly, I absolutely am supportive of your comments, Councillor Thomas. It's a great thing about democracy that you can approach the podium and have that freedom of speech and demand accountability from your elected officials. So that I have had circled as something that I also would not be able to support. Thirdly, discussing, we're kind of on our own little island here in terms of not having a seconder, particularly on notices of motion. And this is something I think that we should look at, and there's absolutely no downfall to having a seconder required for a notice of motion. It's preventative to having repetitive motions brought forward that could come from a member of council on a repeated basis. If you wanted to discuss it, you still have somebody that is agreeable to seconding the motion. They may still vote against it later, but there's no downfall. And what you're preventing is potentially a councillor who may just bring forward a motion 1 week of privatizing a department in the city. And then the next meeting, privatizing another department of the city, or you know, going on a one-by-one case where needing a seconder has absolutely no downfall to this. So I think we should have a seconder requirement in the notice of motion. I'm actually a little surprised even we don't use seconders on the motions that are prepared in advance. I think we're a little too loose. I've seen minutes get moved by councillors who were not in the meetings, both open and closed, and we need to slow down. And, you know, that takes a lot of thought, and we're moving minutes at times that if we're not in the meeting, we shouldn't be moving them. So that's okay with me, but we just need to be thoughtful on those actions. But I really do think we need a seconder on the notice of motion provision.
You want to speak to it? Go ahead.
Through your worship, again, we can do such a thing if you would like to make a motion and have council vote on that. It is a bit tricky because the notice of motion, it's not actually a motion at that point, it's just notice. So it might be, in looking at the procedural bylaw, I think a supporter rather than a seconder might be a way to get around that, because it's not technically a motion until it comes forward at the next meeting.
Just going to ask Scott to clarify, was that your intention on notice of motion, or just that motions would be seconded? Just for clarity.
That the notice of motion be seconded, because once it's brought forward, it can be in the public eye. So that's an appropriate time to have that secondment or that support required. Now, and I'd be okay with a follow-up report. I wonder if the follow-up report could be done before the draft bylaw would come back, or what would be the procedure there that it might come back?
I would suggest that we can make amendments as we go, that we'd have this report and deal with that at another time, but I'll come back to you at some point. Others, Councillor Merton, go ahead.
Through your worship, I'd like to go back to the public question comments. I'm wondering if there is a compromise where we have the option of people coming to a podium and speaking, or if they chose submitting a question in advance. The advantage of a question in advance, it allows for a fulsome response, but we also need to respect the democratic freedom of speech. So I would like to suggest we consider either or, and it would be up to the individual which they would like to pursue. Is that a possibility within this?
Oh, I would suggest that's the case now. Anyone can submit their question in advance in writing, depending what kind of answer they want. They don't have to wait as it is now. If the thinking, I think, behind having what was maybe recommended in number 7 is from time to time we'll get a question from the podium that's very complicated, and maybe we should be just saying we'll get back to you next meeting because staff needs to look at it. But boy, you'd encourage anyone that's with a complicated question to give it to us in advance if they want a good answer. If they don't want a good answer, then we'll never get there no matter what we do. But
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. You touched on a point that I think is worth exploring just a bit more. I think the fact with this, and Council, this is ultimately your decision, but it was the notion that when questions do come forward, staff want to be best prepared to provide the best possible information to whoever has taken the time to come forward with that question. So requiring members of the public to pre-register a question really gives staff at least a day, part of a day, to formulate the response, and hopefully when that person asks the question, council and the member asking the question get a sufficient answer. If not, I would agree with you that, again, nothing to say that allowing podium time and questions to come at any time, but we need to be better prepared to allow staff to report back on an issue. I hate to create a lot of make work with a lot of reports that could come out of nowhere, but the response to the question might simply be, thank you for the question, and we will return a response at a later date. So,
thanks. Any other comments? What I'm going to do, I think, is I'll ask Councillor Mckay to amend her motion if possible to remove 7 and 12, and then we'll maybe vote on them separately. If that works.
That's fine, yes.
So then what we're doing is I'm going to call the vote on the recommendations that are all contained in here with the exception of recommendation 7 and 12. Fairly clear. So I'll call the question. All in favor? So that is carried. Now if we can go back to number 7. Ms. Bloomfield, maybe what we should do is just move the recommendation number 7 as is, and we can vote it up or down and then go from there. So Marion, I'll ask you to move 7 as is, as recommended.
I'll make a motion to move recommendation number 7 as identified in the report.
Thank you. Discussion around that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. In favor? Seeing 1, seeing 2, seeing 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is defeated. You can do the same with number 12.
I'll make a motion that we remove recommendation number 12.
Through your worship, with removing number 12, it keeps the limit at number 2. So unless you want to change the limit from 2, then we do not need a motion.
Sorry, or the motion would be to move it to 5, and then we'd vote that up and down, which would be, in fact, a motion to switch it from 2 to 5, which you're not prepared to do. Is anyone else prepared to move that?
This is just to get it on the table and we can vote it up and down?
Yes, but if nobody moves it, then it doesn't get on the table and it stays at 2, so it doesn't matter. Okay. And I'm looking around and I'm not seeing anyone moving it, so that's a vote the same way. So 12 remains out of it, and we've passed the rest of it with save and accept 7 and 12, right? Right. Thank you. Oh, sorry, back to you, Scott. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Body. If I may make the first of 2 follow-up motions, I would ask that staff bring back a report to assess the parameters of cell phone use, both in open and in closed, and committees.
Sorry, Councillor Kepke.
Just a question. Cell phone use related to recording and taking photos. Is that what you're saying?
This would be cell phone use in terms of texting, messaging. If a member of council needs to text or message, I would think it's reasonable that they could leave the chambers to conduct that business.
So you're not saying anything about recording or photos?
No, but that's because it's already in the bylaw. So this would be, it would already be inclusive to the report that would come back.
Going to go to Brianna first. Go ahead.
Through your worship, I'm more than welcome to bring back a further report. I do have some wording here that you could consider and either vote in favor of or opposed as well. So I will just read that and you can decide how you wish to proceed. You could add to the procedural bylaw that members present at a meeting shall not use electronic devices to discuss business on the agenda, i.e. by text, chat room, email, etc.
Back to you, Councillor Gregg, if that works as a motion.
I guess that would be fine, except it would never be known to any councillor what kind of communication or business was being conducted on a cell phone.
Okay, for clarity, if you can maybe just state what your motion is, and then we'll have a discussion around that without trying to put words into your mouth, and then we can vote on it.
To bring back a report to evaluate the parameters on cell phone use and what's permissible in open and closed meetings as well as committees.
Good, thank you. Deputy Mayor Larry, and then Travis.
I need some clarification. If you're talking about using a phone, I could send an email by phone. We have some double taskers on the panel. So I have my iPad right here. If I'm not allowed to use my phone and I want to send an email, I can still send an email. How are we shutting down the cell phones and not the iPads when we have to use the iPad to follow along in council? Like I don't see how we can shut down someone using their cell phone without shutting down their iPad too. Just wondering.
Probably a good part of the discussion when if and when we get to a report, because that would kind of fall under that. Councillor Dodd.
Worship, on this item that Councillor Gregg had just brought up, as well as recommendation 12, we are here as members representing the public. Any of our behaviors here is going to be judged by ourselves the next election and by members of the public. If we are using our phones inappropriately, you're using your tablets inappropriately. Prior to that, people were using their computers inappropriately. It's up to council members, I think, to really kind of give themselves jurisdictions about what their usages are going to be and how that is reflected back on their performance when they have a discussion. I hear you, Councillor Gregg. No one wants to see anyone using a phone inappropriately, but do we know that anyone's using it inappropriately? And my question with regards to recommendation number 12, of when someone uses it 2 or 5, same thought. If someone chooses not to be at council for 5 times, that's up to the public to make that deciding factor if that someone is abusing their privileges. So cell phones, we're in an age of technology where everything we have, someone here has a watch, an Apple Watch, that would be able to do the same sort of communication. I think if you're starting to talk about electronics, I think we're getting in a time where electronics are a part of our world. And I think that should be left up to your performance and the public.
Richard, did you have your hand up, or?
I'm not sure there's anything I can add. I'm not going to support the motion. I really just don't even see a problem here.
That's my point. Exactly. I think, like, Councillor Gregg, do you think that there's some grand thing going on, but like, really, like, it's not a problem. Like, we're not, when my wife texts me and says, bring this home with you, message received, you know, like, it's not, I'm not texting Marion or Travis, like.
I hear you. We've had members of the public pointing out that we're on our cell phones a lot, but there's times that I've got notes on there that I'm not carrying this thing, so they're on there, and maybe a note that I want to pull up when I'm at a council meeting. But anyway, what I'll do is we'll call the question on that. I think we've beat it around a little bit. All in favor of Scott's motion? In favor? 1, 2, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is defeated. Next one was with regard to seconder for motions.
Thanks, Mayor Boy. The second follow-up motion is a motion that the procedural bylaw has a requirement for a secondment or supporter of notice of motions.
Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Koepke.
Just clarity, this isn't when someone gives a notice of motion, it's when the notice of motion is presented? Is that correct?
That would be, yeah.
Because when you give a notice of motion, you're just stating a statement. You're
Yeah.
not making a motion.
That at the next
When the
council
motion-
meeting.
Yeah, when the motion comes back to the next council meeting, you're asking that there be a seconder as well?
Well, I think what I'm trying to highlight is if we get topics that come back repeatedly that a councillor was moving that maybe aren't going to go anywhere or are repetitive, that this is a mechanism that you have in your procedural bylaw, like most other municipalities, and it alleviates that from occurring. We seem to have it, I guess if you don't have it at the notice of motion, then it gets to be already in the public realm. So it should be at the notice of motion. And I think it's, you know, it highlights something that Deputy Mayor O'Leary's advocated before. and spoke to is that he likes to see councillors working together and communicating in advance and so forth on topic matter or looking to build some consensus. So if you couldn't find a seconder at that time, then this would preclude that from coming forward.
I'm wondering, Councillor Gregg, we've started down a discussion on something that wasn't in a report. It is something that could pass or fail tonight. And I wonder, and we're having a discussion with live grenades kind of moving forward without really time to think about it or anyone. I wonder if you'd be better off to withdraw your motion, raise it at corporate services at committee so they can have a go around there and maybe a report and think it through, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
So Ms. Bloomfield, we've completed your report in its entirety there.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Ms. Coulter, we're down to 12D, which is Southbridge.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, this is a request by Southbridge Healthcare LP Inc. They were granted conditional site plan approval this past January for a 160-bed long-term care facility. The conditions relating to site plan approval have been met and an application has been made for building permit. The fee for that building permit has been paid and staff are in a position to issue the building permit. Normally, development charges are payable at the time of issuance of the building permit. However, amendments to the Development Charges Act that Ms. Allen alluded to earlier provide for development charge deferral for certain classes of development. A long-term care facility operated under that act is that one of those types of development as outlined by 26 of the Development Charges Act. In this case, the development charge is $298,859. As per the Act, it would be paid in 6 installments. The first one being on occupancy of the building and then on the 5 anniversaries thereafter. We are recommending an agreement to be registered on title so that if there was a default in any of the years, that it would be added to the taxes and collected in the same manner. So the recommendation, Your Worship, is that Council would direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute a development charges deferral agreement to provide for the payment of the applicable DC in 6 installments, the first being on the date of occupancy and 5 subsequent anniversaries of occupancy.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Pam. I read the letter. He's asking for the development charges to be waived or deferred until occupancy, and you're giving him another 5 years. Why is that?
Through Your Worship, it's not staff that are giving it or offering it, but when we investigated the changes to the Development Charges Act and the requirements that Sections 26 lays out, it's that's the way it is to be done. It's not discretionary. It's what the Act provides for this type of development class.
Okay, so obviously he doesn't know that. No. Okay, with that, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. I think you've got the next one too, Ms. Coulter.
I do. Yes. Thank you, Your Worship. The city received an offer for lands located in the industrial park on the south side of 23rd Street back in June. The property is approximately 1 acre in size. The official plan designates the property employment and hazard, and it's zoned M2 and hazard. There was a closed report that gave direction to the city solicitor on July 13th and an open report on July 27th. Notice was given in accordance with the city's land sale bylaw, and no comments were received with respect to council's notice to declare or intention of to declare it surplus. The process has complied with the city's land sale bylaw. The offer is for $30,000 for just over 1 acre of land. It also includes a buyback clause if there isn't a building permit by the 3rd anniversary between 18 months and the third anniversary of closing. The offer is from Owen Sound Fuels, Inc., Mr. Brad Duncan, President. I would note that the development is subject to the city's normal review process. There are 2 bylaws presented for council, one to declare it surplus and a second to allow the mayor and clerk to execute any and all documents to finalize the sale.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hamley?
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, you want to speak to it?
I'll second it.
Okay, no one else wants to speak to it. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. Mr. Kafalis, I think you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Owen Sound Flight Services is seeking renewal of their lease at the Owen Sound Billy Bishop Regional Airport. Staff is recommending renewal of the lease for 1 year and moving forward on renewing on an annual basis. The rental rates will increase by the Ontario Consumer Price Index. The lease does include a 90-day termination clause that can be exercised by either party. As such, staff is asking City Council to direct the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents to enter into a lease agreement with Owen Sound Flight Services Incorporation.
Great, thank you. Councilor Merton?
Through your worship, I'll move that recommendation.
Great, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thanks, Dennis. I'm not sure who's got the next one. Purchasing with regard to Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. Kate?
That's the landfill leachate hauling first, Your Worship.
Did I skip one?
Yes, you did, sir.
Oh, there we go. 12G, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff is asking City Council to award the contract for landfill leachate hauling to BioAg Services Limited in the amount of $321,300 for a 2-year term, and to direct the manager of purchasing, risk, and asset management to issue a purchase order to confirm the bid. The contract is based on the hauling average amount of leachate over the last 5 years, which is approximately about 19,402 cubic meters. This quantity may vary depending on the amount of precipitation the area receives. The city did receive 4 bids on the tender.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Dennis, you know, leachate is one of those things I just can't get enough of. I wish we could have a full presentation on leachate and all its, oh, never mind. I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Come to operations. We've spent hours at an operations meeting discussing leachate. Any other questions? All in favor? That's carried. Now you're off the hook. Back over to you, Ms. Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a similar purchasing report to award our ongoing service agreement with Microsoft Enterprise. And this is to cover the city's desktop, laptop, server operating systems, the back office server systems, which provides our email services, as well as our office product suite. So this is a 3-year agreement with Microsoft. It sets the overall budget for the services, but it does give us the opportunity to be somewhat flexible with the packages within that service agreement, and that is something that IT is looking at currently.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Your Worship, I'd move that recommendation.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried.
Thank you, Worship. This is a report regarding the Digital Services Squad funding agreement. The Digital Main Street program is a program funded by the province of Ontario in partnership with OBIAAs. They help small downtown businesses improve their use of technology and better market their businesses online and sell online. At the request of the DIA, Mr. Fisher made an application under the program, and the city has been awarded a grant in the amount of $28,000. The recommendation is that you approve a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute that contribution agreement for funding.
Great, thank you. Either. Go ahead, one of you two over there, if you want to move it. Don't fight.
Through your worship, I would move that recommendation.
Great, thanks. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 12J. Mr. Kafalis.
Thank you, Your Worship. The County of Grey is seeking permission to use 2 existing city bus stops to service their Grey County Transit Service. Grey County Transit Service will consist of 3 fixed routes that will link Owen Sound to other communities in Grey County. This service will not only service our residents, but will also connect approximately 61,000 potential visitors with Owen Sound. The stops they want to use are at the transit terminal and at smart centers. As such, staff is seeking or asking council to authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement between the city and the County of Grey for the use of city's 2 transit stops.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I would move that recommendation.
Any questions, any discussions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Down to, am I right? Yeah. Down to 12K is a verbal report from Deputy Mayor O'Leary from Grey County.
Thank you, Your Worship. Grey County Council update. First climate change task force meeting was held on the 13th of August. Among the discussions was an overview of current climate change initiatives and referenced a report from the University of Guelph Master's students. The students provided some recommendations that included the following: setting minimum density thresholds for new green developments, implementing the recommendations of the Natural Heritage Study, developing a scoring system for evaluating new development proposals, criteria such as walkability and climate change preparedness, and limiting new residential lots created outside of the settlement areas. The report recommends creating an action plan with the goal of mitigating the county's impact on climate change and preparing for its effects. The Climate Change Action Plan outline was presented to the committee, as well as information about the Partners for the Climate Change Protection Program, which is a joint initiative between the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the ICLEI, who is the consultant selected in the RFP process. This plan will be for the county and all lower tier municipalities. Excuse me. The Climate Change Action Plan will identify a path forward to a sustainable community and will develop a policy document to identify initiatives to be implemented which will reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions. The plan will be a mitigation-focused climate change plan that will provide recommendations on adaptation. The plan will have both a municipality emissions component and community component. The target completion of the Climate Change Action Plan is the winter of 2021. The community survey was done and has been reviewed. A proposed engagement strategy is being worked on. The first Owen Sound Hanover Task Force meeting was held on September 1st. A committee that I will be sitting on. Hanover and Owen Sound are the only 2 solely designated settlement areas in Grey County. We will be analyzing social and economic conditions and their impact on Grey County as a whole. The task force will make recommendations for enhancements or improvements to these conditions. Some of the key concerns are labor force, social issues and supports, transportation and housing. The task force will be intact over the next 8 months. Health unit report, we continue to have full control over the outbreak in Grey and Bruce County. As of August 22nd, 2020, in Grey and Bruce counties, a total of 129 cases, all except 1 have been recovered. 0 cases currently hospitalized, 0 deaths, and 0 facility in COVID-19 outbreak. 0 schools in outbreak, 0 daycare in outbreak. Continued successful deployment of case management, contact management, and outbreak investigation and management, including workplace investigation. Working with all schools in Grey and Bruce to ensure safe school opening, public health has been actively engaged in a number of activities to support school reopening in our region. Activities to date: continues communication with local healthcare providers and primary care physicians, weekly meeting with hospital CEOs, weekly meeting with assessment centers, continuous consultation meetings with local school boards and school officials from all schools in Grainburgs, establishing processes related to managing of cases and outbreaks in schools, media releases, scheduling for several communications session on safe school reopening. The first round has been completed with parents, foster parents, and school staff. Mask use in public spaces, renewal of the MOH Section 22 order on September 10th, 2020 for 4 more weeks to allow municipalities sufficient window of time to pass a bylaw, and ongoing actions taken by the Grainburgs Health Unit. Receive and review reopening plans for locations closed due to COVID-19, including inspections as required. Board of Health Unit Infectious Disease Team continue with case and contact management, reporting, and responding to COVID-19 related calls. Contact tracing exceeds provincial targets with 100% of all cases contacted within 24 hours. The Grainburgs Health Unit team continue to ensure essential public health activities not related to COVID-19. And with that, Your Worship, I would move receipt of those minutes.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Deputy Mayor Larry? Seeing none, all in favor? That's receiving that. That's carried. Thanks. I think we're down to the number 13, the consent agenda.
Through you, Your Worship, on the consent agenda this evening is a memo respecting minutes for receipt from the DIA board and a flag flying request from Big Brothers Big Sisters Grey Bruce. Business licenses were issued to Sail Restaurant and Catering at 1023 2nd Ave East, Image by Design Events and Floral Studio at 136 10th Street East, Wildflowers Consignment Boutique at 840 2nd Ave East, Highlander Handyman at 520 17th Street East, TJF Cleaning Services at 1787 9th Ave East, and T2 Green, a hawker peddler license for 956 Street East. Lastly, there's the information package. A full listing is available at 13E.
Great, thank you.
Moved by myself that City Council receive items 13A to E on the consent agenda dated September 14, 2020.
And all in favor? That is carried. It's great to see 6 new businesses open. I also see here there's minutes from the DIAs. Anybody have anything to report?
Thank you, Your Worship. Other than a clean audit presented by Vicki Watson of BDO, there's nothing more to report.
Thank you. 13, correspondence, 13E. I am on, which is presented for information of council. I guess that was part of the package. 14, we have no committee minutes for recommendation for approval. We have no postponed matters. We have no motions for which a notice was previously given. Discussion of additional businesses. I think, go ahead, Councillor Thomas.
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't think of this earlier, but I did just want to put a quick plug in tonight for the Music at the Market series being sponsored by the city, which is starting this Wednesday from noon until 2 o'clock with the Rob Elder Trio. On Thursday, Larry Jensen and Pete Devlin are playing, and on Friday, the Becketts are playing at the market. 12 till 2, people are invited to come down, socially distance, and take in the music and maybe bring their lunch with them as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gregg, I think you had your hand up as well.
I did. Thanks, Mayor Body. And I understand if you don't want to entertain this. This just rose earlier tonight when you didn't see me and I didn't speak up quick enough before calling a vote. But I would ask that Deputy Mayor O'Leary be offered the opportunity to retract his comment to Councillor Merton. We all value everyone's opinion, but it came across that she wasn't educated because she was voting against the motion. So I wonder if you could clarify or retract that comment.
I can clarify. I just think you had the opportunity to educate yourself in camera. And that's all I was asking. You said that we put a Band-Aid on. I don't understand what the issue with that is.
We'll move on. Someone else want to speak? No, it's me, I guess. A couple of weeks ago, well, over the last number of weeks, we're where do I begin? Over the last several months, of course, we've had COVID here, and we've seen different individuals step up within our community to come up with extra masks, different businesses that have donated them when they were short, with nurses at the hospital, with long-term care homes, et cetera. One of the things that I think was most amazing is as business was dropping off, or volume of cases were dropping off, care were dropping off at our Grey Bruce Regional Health Center at the hospital. I forget, it was something like 200 people signed up in a couple of hours to volunteer and help out at long-term care and lend their support. A little bit bigger, the community keeps growing. Bruce Power went overboard really and came up with a lot of PPE and supplies to try and help out the community throughout really all of Ontario before they were done. We know in Owen Sound how the community comes together when we're in crisis and we're under pressure. We saw it with the frozen pipes, people looking after each other, doing, inviting friends over that had frozen pipes for weeks, 6 weeks, to do laundry and things. And of course, we saw the outpouring of funds and things after our August 10th, 2015 arsons, when a lot of money was donated. Recently, we were contacted here at the city by a Owen Sound resident named Louise Gamble, who happens to be a cousin of Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble from Chatsworth. She was over at a school in Taiwan, and we know about our relationship with Dai, our sister city in West China, and how that was started by local residents that went over there to work with, I believe, United Church, but to set up universities and schools. In Taiwan, a Canadian named George Leslie Mckay went over in the mid-1800s to set up a mission and schools and things for women, museums, et cetera, in Taiwan. That school continues to be sponsored and supported by Canadians, which is pretty amazing. So that's Louise Gamble was over there, and when she was coming back, her students wanted to do something to help Canada, and they got together and they donated 16,000 masks to Owen Sound to be used for long-term care homes for staff, Grey County, the Grey County homes throughout, long-term care throughout Grey County, which was pretty special. So we had a meeting last week to receive them, and I received this banner from the Tam Kang Middle School in Taiwan, which was sent over with Ms. Gamble, which is pretty special. Oops. There was also some little Canadian flags that I've been wearing on my chest here. Ms. Louise, my name is Jason from JIB, which is the school. This year, you have to go to Canada, so I want to say thank you for you. I'm worried about COVID-19 in Canada, so I prepared 10 masks for you. So it was pretty special that we look after each other in the community, and our community keeps growing. And now part of the Owen Sound community is in Taiwan at this school, and it's pretty special to be able to receive those, send a big thank you back to them. I do note that there's a Canadian Mckay committee. So in honor of George Leslie Mckay, there has been a stamp that is in Taiwan to recognize his contribution, and they're also asking that we support them in Canada with a Mckay 150 stamp. It's HTTP website chng.it/ no one's going to remember this, 7 capital G, capital P, lower block K, Q, B, R, V. And you can go into that and support Canada putting together a stamp recognizing George Mckay's representation of Canada in support of Taiwan. So that was pretty special. And thank you to Louise Gamble for pulling this together, and to my assistant Sharon Edwards, who figured out how to get these things shipped over here. My other thought is this. Some people look at the turn of the new year, New Year's Eve, January 1st, as being the start of a new year. Something in the back of my mind, and I think probably most of us, it seems to be ingrained that September 1st is kind of the start of a new year. You know, we start looking forward to new challenges, getting that new backpack, new set of clothes that we all did as kids and now do for our kids, and taking them off to school. So September 1st somehow is a chance to look forward, to restart, to renew, and it's an optimistic chance to take on new challenges. We as a community, we as a country, we as a world have been through some terrible months of uncertainty. Back in March, changes were coming daily around here for your staff. We were making decisions daily that we were changing the next day because the information was changing that quickly. We kept waiting for these new changes, and then it kind of started to settle out. But this COVID stuff has been so difficult for all of us. It's been stressful for everybody in the community. And I'm talking more about the community, but we as council members are also part of the community and have felt that stress and have talked to people that have felt stressed, and we get it, and we feel it sort of the same way. We've now been several months that we have hit an equilibrium, or things have not gotten any worse, and we've done a great job in Graham Bruce, and it's because of people in the community that have practiced safe distancing, that have washed their hands, that have worn their masks in public, that have looked after each other, as well as that guidance from the Grey Bruce Health Unit, that Dr. Era, that has given us leadership and given us ideas. Certainly the people that have worked in healthcare, policemen, firemen, people that are going into a house, that have been extra careful and done all those great things, deserve a huge thank you for us. But I think right now, as we look into the fall, into starting school, we've got an opportunity here to start to look forward and not sit in pins and needles wondering what's going to happen tomorrow, and start to be a little more optimistic and try and move forward. We know, having said that, we know that they're talking in the last couple of days about increased COVID cases again across Ontario, across Canada, across the world. We continue to have good numbers up here, but as I think the Prime Minister said, we've got to keep our guard up, and certainly our Premier said something similar today, that our cases are increasing, they're likely to increase, but we've got 6 months of experience, that we kind of know what we're doing, hopefully. We know how to react as it's coming, and I think it's really important that A, the community doesn't let their guard down, but B, that we look forward optimistically with this new reality, with this new normal that we know we're going to be in for the next couple of months, and start to try and move forward. So I ask everyone to please be kind to one another. Look after yourselves, but be courteous to others. Others are going to go about things differently. They're going to understand the rules differently, but we need to support one another, not bring each other down with criticism and hacking at each other, when we can support each other as a community. We've done a great job. I think we continue to do a great job. Council, for us, looking forward, time to look forward. Got a new city manager. We've been in this holding pattern for 6 months. I know Tim is moving ahead with things. I know all of our staff are moving ahead, but all of us have got to start thinking optimistically and moving forward and working together. So those are my thoughts that I wanted to say. My poor kid's going to get the same lesson on his way to Fanshawe on Wednesday in the car. So I thought I'd practice it here first. So thanks everybody for everything we've done in the last 6 months, but let's go forward. With that, number 18.
I'll move, Your Worship, that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
I'm doing it backwards. So that was carried. Number 19, motion to adopt.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merton, that action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations, and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
All in favor? That is carried. Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion to be given at this time? Seeing none. Bylaws. Ms. Bloomfield.
Through you, Your Worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to provide authority to the treasurer to execute acknowledgement of funding relating to COVID-19 financial pressures, a bylaw to amend the fees and charges bylaw respecting encroachment fees and overnight parking passes, a bylaw to regulate encroachments on public land, a bylaw to execute an agreement with Southbridge Healthcare respecting an extension of time for payment of development charges, a bylaw to execute a servicing agreement with Roman Kozak for property at 1685 9th Ave East, a bylaw to declare property at 23rd Street East surplus to the needs of the city, a bylaw to execute the necessary documents for the sale of lands described as Part 3, Plan 16R 5091, 23rd Street East, a bylaw to execute a contribution agreement with Ontario Business Improvement Association for the Digital Service Squad grant, a bylaw to execute an agreement with the County of Grey respecting bus stop locations for the Grey Transit route, a bylaw to amend the bylaw enforcement policy to permit proactive enforcement when hotspots are identified by council, and a bylaw to amend the appointed officers bylaw to appoint a bylaw enforcement officer for the purpose of enforcing the noise bylaw.
Great, thank you.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merton, that bylaw numbers 2020-096, 097, 098, 099, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, and 108 be passed and enacted.
So all in favor? And that is carried. So that completes our business for the night. It's 9:02. I'm not sure who won the bet in staff, but thanks everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.